Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. What if one lie could unravel your entire life? Picture this. A glitzy birthday bash at San Francisco's ritziest hotel, a breakup that shocks the elite, and a name, Miles Carter, tossed out in desperation. Who is he? A nobody from the wrong side of town, or the key to Lila Nguyen's freedom? Buckle up, because this story's about to twist in ways you won't see coming. The ballroom at the Fairmont Hotel glittered like a damn chandelier factory had exploded in there. Crystal lights dangled from the ceiling, throwing golden flecks across the polished hardwood floor. The air smelled like expensive perfume, floral with a hint of money, and the soft hum of jazz floated from a live band in the corner. It was Lila Nguyen's 17th birthday, and Nob Hill's elite had turned out in full force. Tech moguls, hotel tycoons, and their Botoxed wives mingled with champagne flutes in hand, their laughter sharp and practiced. Lila stood in the center of it all, a vision in a red satin dress that hugged her like a second skin, her dark hair cascading over one shoulder. She looked like a princess. She felt like a prisoner. Her dad, Daniel Nguyen, hovered near the bar, his tailored suit screaming power. He'd built an empire of boutique hotels across the Bay Area, and tonight wasn't just about Lila. It was about showing off. Across the room, Ethan Tran leaned against a wall, his black blazer unbuttoned, a smirk playing on his lips. He was 18, cocky, and the heir to a transportation dynasty that hauled freight up and down the West Coast. Their families had been plotting their merger, business and blood, for years. Lila hated every second of it. She clutched the microphone tighter, her knuckles whitening. The band had just finished a slow rendition of Happy Birthday, and the crowd clapped politely, their eyes on her like she was some prize pony at a county fair. Ethan sauntered over, holding a bouquet of roses that looked like they'd been plucked from a catalog. Perfect, lifeless. "Happy birthday, babe," he said, voice dripping with that lazy charm he thought worked on everyone. He thrust the roses at her. "Figured you'd like these." Lila stared at the flowers, then at him. "You forgot, didn't you?" Ethan blinked, his smirk faltering. "What?" "My birthday. You didn't even text me this morning. I saw you flirting with that girl from chem class at lunch instead." Her voice trembled, but she forced it steady. The room quieted, heads turning. "Chill, Lila. I've been busy. And she's just a friend." He shrugged, like it was no big deal. That shrug snapped something inside her. She'd spent months, years, swallowing his half-assed excuses, his wandering eyes, his total ignorance of who she really was. Her dad's voice echoed in her head. "Ethan's your future, Lila. Don't mess this up." But tonight, under the weight of that stupid crown someone had plopped on her head, she couldn't take it anymore. "I'm done," she said, loud enough for the mic to catch it. The words bounced off the walls, and a gasp rippled through the crowd. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Done with what?" he asked, stepping closer, his tone low and warning. "With you." Lila ripped the crown off her head and tossed it onto the dessert table, where it landed in a pile of macarons. "I'm breaking up with you, Ethan. Right here, right now." The room erupted into whispers. A woman in a sequined dress choked on her champagne. Daniel Nguyen straightened, his face darkening as he pushed through the crowd toward her. Ethan, though, just laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that cut through the noise. "You're breaking up with me? In front of everyone?" He crossed his arms, unfazed. "Good luck explaining that to your dad. Our families have a deal, Lila. You don't get to just walk away." "Oh, I can," she shot back, her heart pounding. She didn't have a plan, didn't know what came next, but the words spilled out anyway. "Because I'm already dating someone else." The lie hit the air like a grenade. Ethan's smirk vanished. Daniel froze mid-step, his glass halfway to his lips. The whispers turned into a low roar. "Bullshit," Ethan said, loud enough for the mic to pick up. A few people snickered. "Who? Some loser from Mission Academy? Name him." Lila's mind raced. She needed a name. Any name. Then it hit her. A quiet kid from her photography elective, always hunched over an old Nikon, his hoodie frayed at the cuffs. She barely knew him, but he'd stuck in her head for some reason. "Miles Carter," she blurted. Ethan's jaw dropped. "Miles Carter? What? That nobody from Tenderloin? The guy who smells like thrift stores and desperation?" "He's more real than you'll ever be," Lila snapped, doubling down. "At least he doesn't forget my birthday." Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You're lying. There's no way you'd slum it with a guy like that. Prove it." "I don't have to prove anything to you," she said, but her stomach twisted. She hadn't thought this far. "Right." Ethan turned to the crowd, raising his voice. "She's full of it, folks. No boyfriend, just a tantrum. But if this Miles Carter's real, I'll find him, and I'll make sure he regrets ever crossing me." He grabbed his glass from a passing waiter, downed it in one gulp, and smashed it against the floor. Shards skittered across the hardwood, glinting under the lights. The crowd gasped again, louder this time. Lila's dad stormed over, his face a mask of fury. "Lila, what the hell are you doing?" Daniel growled, grabbing her arm. "You're embarrassing us." She yanked free, her red dress swishing as she spun toward the exit. "I'm embarrassing you? Maybe you should have raised a daughter instead of a business deal." The doors loomed ahead, heavy oak with brass handles. She shoved them open, the cool San Francisco night spilling in, fog curling around the streetlights, the distant hum of cable cars rattling down California Street. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she stumbled outside, the crownless princess of Nob Hill, now a fugitive from her own party. Behind her, Ethan's voice carried through the open doors. "Miles Carter, huh? We'll see about that." Lila leaned against a lamppost, her breath fogging in the damp air. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a cold knot in her chest. Miles Carter. She'd seen him around school, lanky, quiet, always scribbling in a notebook or fiddling with that beat-up camera. She didn't even know if he'd heard of her, let alone if he'd play along. But she'd said his name, and now it was out there, spreading like wildfire through Mission Academy's gossip mill. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking as she scrolled through her contacts. Nothing under Miles. Of course not. She didn't know him. A text from Tessa Kim, her best friend, popped up. "WTF just happened? You okay?" Lila ignored it. She needed to find this guy before Ethan did. Before her dad dragged her back into that ballroom and forced her to take it all back. The fog thickened, swallowing the hotel's glowing windows. Somewhere in the city, Miles Carter was out there, probably clueless that his name had just turned him into a target. Lila straightened, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She'd made a mess, but she wasn't backing down. Not yet. The night stretched ahead, full of shadows and possibilities. She took a deep breath, the salty tang of the bay mixing with the faint scent of roses still clinging to her dress. "Miles Carter," she muttered to herself. "Whoever you are, I hope you're ready for this." And with that, she started walking, away from the Fairmont, away from Ethan, away from the life she'd been told to live. Hey, what's Lila gotten herself into? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Who do you think Miles is? Let's find out together in the next part. The Monday after the Fairmont fiasco felt like walking into a lion's den with a raw steak strapped to her chest. Mission Academy buzzed with whispers as Lila pushed through the crowded halls, her red Converse scuffing the polished floors. The Gothic arches of the old San Francisco school loomed overhead, their shadows crisscrossing the lockers like a spider web. She'd barely slept, replaying that moment. Ethan's smashed glass, her dad's furious glare, and the name she'd thrown out like a lifeline, Miles Carter. She didn't even know what he looked like up close. Just a vague memory of a hoodie, a camera, and those quiet eyes that never seemed to meet anyone's. But Tessa Kim, her ride or die since middle school, had tracked him down faster than a bloodhound. Photography elective, third period, Tessa had texted last night. He's the weird one with the Nikon. Good luck, girl. Now, Lila stood outside room 214, peering through the glass panel in the door. The classroom smelled like developer chemicals and dust, a faint tang that stung her nose. Inside, a dozen kids hunched over tables cluttered with lenses and prints. And there he was, Miles Carter, slouched in the back, his dark hair poking out from a faded giant's cap. He fiddled with an ancient camera, its strap frayed like it had been through a war. His hoodie was gray, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing skinny arms smudged with ink. Lila took a deep breath, smoothed her denim jacket, and pushed the door open. Heads turned, but Miles didn't look up until she was practically on top of him. "Hey," she said, her voice too loud in the quiet room. "You're Miles, right?" He froze, fingers still on the camera lens, his eyes flicked up, hazel, sharp, like they could see through her, and then back down. "Yeah," he mumbled. "What's up?" She shifted her weight, aware of the stairs drilling into her back. "Can we talk? Like, outside?" Miles hesitated, then nodded, grabbing his backpack. The teacher, a wiry guy with a ponytail, waved them off with a distracted, "5 minutes, Carter." Out in the hall, the air felt cooler, less suffocating. Lila leaned against a locker, crossing her arms. Miles stood a few feet away, clutching his camera like a shield. Up close, he was taller than she'd thought, all lanky limbs and awkward angles. His sneakers were scuffed, the soles peeling at the edges. "So," she started, "you heard about the party, huh?" He raised an eyebrow. "Kinda hard not to. Whole school's talking about how you dumped Tran in front of half of Nob Hill." "Yeah, well," she chewed her lip, searching for the right words. "I kinda said something else. I said I was dating you." Miles blinked, then blinked again. "Me?" "Yeah, you," she rushed on before he could bolt. "Look, it was a spur-of-the-moment thing. Ethan's a jerk, and I needed him off my back. I don't even know you, but your name just popped out." He stared at her, mouth slightly open. "Why me?" "I don't know. You're in my photography class, and I remembered you. That's it." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Anyway, I need a favor. Pretend to be my boyfriend for like a month. Just enough to convince Ethan I'm serious. I'll pay you. $500 when it's over." Miles snorted, a dry, disbelieving sound. "You're kidding." "I'm not." She pulled out her phone, scrolling to a selfie she'd taken at the party, her in that red dress, forcing a smile. "We can start today. Take some pics, post them on Insta, make it look real. Easy money, right?" He shook his head, stepping back. "I don't need your pity cash, Lila. I'm not some charity case." "It's not pity," she snapped, louder than she meant to. "It's a deal. You help me, I help you. What's the problem?" Miles looked away, jaw tight. His fingers tapped the camera, a nervous tick. For a second, she thought he'd walk off. Then he muttered, "My mom's sick. Hospital bills are killing us. 500 could, I don't know, buy us some time." Lila softened. "Then take it. Please. We both get something out of this." He met her eyes again, searching for something, maybe a catch. Finally, he nodded. "Fine. But no pity." And I'm not kissing you for the gram or anything weird. Deal, she said, a grin breaking through. Let's start with Golden Gate Park after school, cool? Yeah, cool. He didn't smile back, but there was a flicker in his expression. Curiosity, maybe. The park was a postcard come to life that afternoon. The fog had burned off, leaving a crisp blue sky over the Golden Gate Bridge's red towers. Grass stretched out in waves, still damp from the morning dew, and the air smelled like eucalyptus and salt from the bay. Lila sat on a picnic table, scrolling through her phone while Miles fiddled with his camera a few feet away. He'd barely said 10 words since they'd gotten there, but he'd agreed to this, step 1 of Operation Fake Boyfriend. Okay, she called, hopping off the table. How about a shot by that tree? Something cute, but not too mushy. Miles squinted at the oak she pointed to, its branches gnarled and sprawling. Sure. Stand there, tilt your head a little, like you're laughing. She posed, forcing a giggle that sounded fake even to her. The shutter clicked, and Miles checked the screen. Not bad, he said. Want to see? She jogged over, peering at the tiny display. The photo was good. Really good. The light hit her just right, softening the edges of her denim jacket, making her look carefree, like someone she wished she was. Damn, you've got skills, she said, nudging him. He shrugged, but a faint flush crept up his neck. It's just a camera. You're the one who makes it work. Flirt, she teased, and he rolled his eyes. They took a few more, her leaning against him, his arms stiffly around her shoulders. It was awkward as hell, but it had looked convincing online. She captioned the best one, Golden Gate vibes with my favorite person, and hit post. Within minutes, the likes rolled in, classmates, randoms, even Tessa with a what is happening comment. See? Lila said, waving her phone. Told you it'd work. Miles was about to reply when a shadow fell over them. She looked up, and her stomach dropped. Ethan Tran stood there, hands in his pockets, his BMW idling on the park road behind him. His dark hair was slicked back, and that smirk was back, sharper than ever. Well, well, he drawled. The happy couple. Didn't think you'd actually stoop this low, Lila. She straightened, stepping in front of Miles. Back off, Ethan. We're done. Oh, I'm not here for you. He turned to Miles, sizing him up like a wolf eyeing a rabbit. Carter, right? The Tenderloin trash. How much she paying you to play house? Miles clenched his fists, but his voice stayed steady. None of your business, man. Wrong answer. Ethan shoved him, hard. Miles stumbled back, tripping over a root and hitting the grass with a thud. His camera skidded a few feet away, lens cap popping off. Ethan, stop it! Lila yelled, shoving him back. He barely budged, laughing as she pounded his chest. What's the matter? Your boyfriend can't fight his own battles. Ethan grabbed her wrist, pulling her close. You're embarrassing yourself with this loser. Miles scrambled up, brushing dirt off his jeans. Let her go, he said, low and firm. Ethan smirked, releasing her with a dramatic flourish. Oh, he speaks. Tell you what, Carter, if you're still around by Friday, I'll make sure you regret it. He sauntered back to his car, tossing a final, happy fake dating, over his shoulder before peeling out, tires screeching. Lila turned to Miles, her heart racing. You okay? He picked up his camera, checking it over. Yeah, lens is fine at least. He glanced at her, hazel eyes unreadable. You sure about this? Guy's a psycho. He's all talk, she lied, brushing it off. But her hands shook as she tucked her phone away. We just need to sell it harder. He'll back off. Miles didn't look convinced, but he nodded. Your call. The sun dipped lower, painting the bridge in shades of orange. Lila watched him sling his backpack over one shoulder, his silhouette sharp against the skyline. She dragged him into this mess, and now Ethan had a target on his back. $500 didn't seem like enough anymore. Will Miles stick to the deal? Subscribe and comment your predictions below. I'm dying to hear what you think happens next. The Tenderloin wasn't a place Lila ever thought she'd end up, but here she was, dodging a puddle of something questionable on the sidewalk outside a dingy coffee shop called Brew and Brews. The neon sign flickered, half the letters burned out, and the air smelled like burnt toast and exhaust from the buses rumbling down Jones Street. It was Wednesday, 2 days after Ethan's stunt at Golden Gate Park, and Miles had texted her to meet him here after school. "My mom works the afternoon shift," he'd written. "Figured you should see where I'm from if we're doing this." Inside, the place was a time capsule. Cracked vinyl booths, a jukebox that hadn't worked since the 90s, and a counter sticky with spilled syrup. A woman in a faded apron wiped down tables, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. She looked up as the bell above the door jingled, and a tired smile spread across her face. "Miles, you're early," she said, then spotted Lila. "Oh, who's this?" "Lila," Miles said, dropping his backpack onto a booth. "She's, a friend from school." He shot Lila a look, play along, and she nodded, sliding into the seat across from him. "Nice to meet you, Lila. I'm Janet." His mom's voice was warm, rough around the edges, like she'd smoked a pack a day once upon a time. She set 2 chipped mugs of coffee on the table, steam curling up in lazy spirals. "You're not from around here, are you?" Lila laughed, a little too loud. "No, ma'am. Nob Hill. Bit of a trek." Janet's eyes twinkled. "Fancy. Well, any friend of Miles is welcome. He doesn't bring many people around." "Mom," Miles groaned, slumping lower in the booth. His cheeks went pink, and Lila hid a grin behind her mug. The coffee was bitter, strong enough to wake the dead, but it grounded her somehow. They'd been dating for 4 days now. More pics on Instagram, a few staged handholds in the halls at Mission Academy. Ethan hadn't shown his face since the park, but the rumors were flying. "Lila's slumming it with the Tenderloin kid. She's just trying to piss off Tran." It was working, sort of. Her dad, though, was another story. He'd left 3 voicemails last night, each one angrier than the last. "Get your head on straight, Lila. This Carter boy's a nobody." "So," she said, swirling the coffee in her mug, "why'd you bring me here? More photo ops?" Miles shrugged, pulling his camera from his bag. "Thought it'd be realer this way. You know, not just some fake-ass park shoot. Plus my mom's cool. She won't snitch." Janet chuckled from behind the counter, where she was refilling a ketchup bottle. "Snitch about what? You two plotting a heist?" "Something like that," Lila said, smirking. She glanced around. The faded posters of Alcatraz tours, the regulars nursing their coffees like lifelines. It was a million miles from Nob Hill's marble floors and caviar hors d'oeuvres. She liked it, though. It felt honest. Miles leaned forward, lowering his voice. "So, what's the deal with Tran? He gonna come after me again?" "He's a coward," she said, waving it off. "All bark, no bite. We just keep this up, and he'll get bored." "You sure?" Miles' eyes narrowed. "Guy looked ready to break my face." "He won't. Trust me." She reached across the table, brushing his hand like she'd seen in movies. Casual, flirty. His fingers twitched under hers, warm and calloused. For a second, she forgot it was fake. The bell jingled again, and Tessa Kim strode in, her combat boots stomping the linoleum. Her short bob swung as she scanned the room, zeroing in on Lila. "There you are. We need to talk. Now." Lila frowned, pulling her hand back. "Tessa?" What's wrong? Tessa didn't sit. She crossed her arms, glaring at Miles like he'd just kicked a puppy. Outside, alone. Miles raised an eyebrow but stayed put, sipping his coffee. Lila followed Tessa out, the door slamming shut behind them. The street was gray, fog creeping in from the bay, muffling the honks of traffic. "What's your deal?" Lila asked, hugging herself against the chill. "My deal?" Tessa's voice was sharp, cutting through the haze. "You're the one cozying up with some rando from photography class, and I'm supposed to just nod and smile?" I dug into him, Lila. "You need to see this." She shoved her phone at Lila. The screen showed a blurry photo, a shot of Lila in the school courtyard, sketching in her notebook, totally unaware. The timestamp was from 2 months ago. Below it, another, her laughing with Tessa at lunch, caught mid-bite. Both credited to M. Carter on some obscure photography blog. Lila's stomach dropped. "What the hell is this?" "He's been stalking you," Tessa said, snatching the phone back. "Before you even pulled that stunt at the party. He's got a whole folder of you, Lila. Creepy much?" "No way." She shook her head, but the images burned into her brain. "He's not like that. He's just artsy." "Artsy?" Tessa snorted. "Wake up. He's playing you. Probably saw a rich girl and thought, jackpot." "That's not—" Lila stopped, doubt creeping in. She'd dragged Miles into this, sure, but what if he'd been watching her all along, waiting for a chance? Before she could argue, a black Escalade rolled up, its tinted windows gleaming. The passenger door swung open, and Daniel Nguyen stepped out, his face a thundercloud. "Lila, get in the car." "Dad?" She froze. "How'd you—" "Tessa called me," he said, nodding at her friend. Tessa looked away, guilty, but defiant. "I've had enough of this nonsense. You're done with that Carter kid." "He's my boyfriend," she lied, clinging to the script. Daniel's laugh was cold. "Boyfriend? He's trash, Lila. I checked him out. Mom's a waitress, Dad's a deadbeat who split years ago. You think I'd let you tank your future for some Tenderloin leech? He's not enough." He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the car. "I'm pulling his scholarship. One call, and he's out of Mission Academy. You want that on your conscience?" Lila yanked free, her pulse racing. "You can't do that." "Watch me." He climbed back into the Escalade, slamming the door. "Home. Now, or he's done." The car peeled away, leaving exhaust and silence in its wake. Tessa sighed. "I'm sorry, Lila. I don't trust him." "Yeah, well, maybe I don't trust you right now," Lila snapped, turning back to the coffee shop. Her head spun. Miles's photos, her dad's threats, Tessa's betrayal. She stormed inside, where Miles still sat, scrolling through his camera. He looked up, frowning. "Everything okay?" "No." She grabbed her bag, voice shaking. "You've been taking pictures of me? Before all this?" Miles's face went pale. "What?" "Don't play dumb. I saw them. Me at school months ago." "What the hell, Miles?" He stood, hands raised. "It's not what you think. You're art, okay? I shoot what inspires me. I wasn't stalking you." "Bullshit!" She slung her bag over her shoulder, tears stinging her eyes. "I trusted you with this, and you're some creep with a camera?" "Lila, wait. Forget it." She shoved past him, the bell clanging as she hit the street again. The fog swallowed her as she walked, fast and blind, her sneakers slapping the pavement. She didn't know where she was going. Just away. Away from Miles, from her dad, from the lie she'd built. Back at Brew and Brews, Miles sank into the booth, staring at the coffee she'd left behind. Janet slid in across from him, her eyes soft but searching. "What happened, kiddo?" "She thinks I'm a freak," he muttered, rubbing his face. "Maybe she's right." "You're not." Janet squeezed his hand. "But you've got a hell of a mess to clean up." He nodded, grabbing his camera. The rain started then, a drizzle that streaked the windows, blurring the world outside. He'd agreed to this for his mom, for the money. But now it was personal. He wasn't letting Ethan or anyone win this, not without a fight. Can Miles win Lila back? Don't miss out. Subscribe and let me know what you think in the comments. The rain hadn't let up by Friday, turning San Francisco into a watercolor painting. Gray streets bleeding into gray skies, the Golden Gate Bridge a faint smudge in the distance. Lila sat in her bedroom on Nob Hill, the walls eggshell white and too clean, like a hospital ward. Her sketchbook lay open on her desk, a half-finished drawing of her mom staring back at her. Soft eyes, a smile Lila barely remembered. She hadn't seen Miles since storming out of Brew and Brews 2 days ago, but his words kept looping in her head. "You're art, okay? I wasn't stalking you." She wanted to believe him. She didn't know if she could. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Tessa. "You still mad? I was just looking out for you." Lila ignored it, flipping to a blank page. She started sketching without thinking, her pencil tracing the outline of a camera. Then Miles's hands, long fingers, ink-stained, gentle in a way Ethan's never were. She stopped, crumpling the paper into a ball. This was stupid. He was a liar or a creep or both. Right? A knock on her door jolted her upright. Her dad's voice came through, clipped and cold. "Lila, downstairs, now!" She groaned, tossing the sketchbook aside. Downstairs meant trouble, probably another lecture about Ethan or the family business. She trudged down the spiral staircase, the chandelier casting prismed light across the marble foyer. Daniel Nguyen stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, but he wasn't alone. A woman sat on the leather couch, her dark hair streaked with gray, her hands folded in her lap. She looked up, and Lila's breath caught. "Mom?" Lin Nguyen smiled, small and hesitant. "Hi, Lila." "What? What are you doing here?" Lila's voice cracked. Her mom had left when she was 6. 11 years of silence, no calls, no letters. Just a ghost in old photos and that one sketch Lila kept hidden. "Your father called me," Lin said, glancing at Daniel. "Said you've been struggling." "Struggling?" Lila spun on her dad. "You mean rebelling against your perfect little plan? I don't need her here to fix me." "Lila," Daniel snapped, "sit down. We're talking about this Carter boy." "Your mother agrees. He's a mistake." Lin's eyes softened. "I didn't say that, Daniel. I said she should have a choice." "A choice?" he scoffed. "She's throwing away everything for some Tenderloin punk. You want her to end up like you, broke and running off to paint in some hippie commune?" Lila's fists clenched. "Don't talk about her like that." "It's fine," Lin said, standing. She stepped closer, her floral skirt brushing the floor. "Lila, I left because I couldn't breathe here. Your dad wanted a life I didn't. I don't want that for you." "Then why'd you come back?" Lila asked, tears prickling her eyes. "Because I heard you're an artist," Lin said simply, "and I wanted to see it." Lila froze. No one called her that. Not her dad, not Ethan, not even Tessa. She'd kept her sketches secret, ashamed of how much they meant. But her mom's words cracked something open, and before she could stop herself, she blurted, "I'll show you, but not here." By Monday, the school was abuzz with a new rumor. Miles Carter's photo had won first place in Mission Academy's annual art showcase. Lila heard it in the halls, whispered between lockers. That Tenderloin kid's got talent. It's a shot of some girl, super intense. She didn't think much of it until third period, when she walked into photography class and saw it. The print hung on the wall, matted in black, catching the fluorescent light. It was her, sitting on the bleachers last fall, hair blowing in the wind, her sketchbook balanced on her knees. The details were sharp, the curve of her pencil, the way her brows furrowed in focus. Miles had captured her like she was a painting herself, raw and real. A plaque beneath it read, "Untitled, Miles Carter, First Place." Her chest tightened. He'd taken this before the party, before their deal, before everything. Miles slunk in late, hood up, avoiding her gaze. He dropped into his usual seat, but she marched over, slamming her bag on the table. "You entered this?" she demanded, pointing at the photo. He flinched, tugging his cap lower. "Yeah. So? It's me, Miles. You didn't even ask." "I didn't think—" He stopped, rubbing his neck. "It was for a grade. I submitted it weeks ago before, I didn't mean to piss you off again." She stared at the photo, then at him. His hazel eyes were tired, shadowed, like he hadn't slept either. "Why me?" she asked, softer this time. "Because you're, I don't know, alive, real." He shrugged, barely audible. "I see you, Lila, even when you don't want me to." Her anger faltered. She wanted to yell, to storm out again, but something in his voice held her there. "You're an idiot," she muttered, sinking into the chair next to him. "Yeah," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I get that a lot." They sat in silence, the hum of the classroom fading around them. She didn't forgive him, not yet, but she didn't hate him either. And when the bell rang, she said, "Meet me at my place tonight. 6. Bring your camera." He blinked. "For what?" "You'll see." The Nguyen house glowed against the foggy Nob Hill dusk, its bay windows spilling warm light onto the street. Inside, Lila had turned the living room into a makeshift gallery. Her sketches, dozens of them, covered the walls, taped up crookedly. Her mom's face, the city skyline, a cherry blossom tree she'd dreamed of painting someday. Miles's photos joined them, prints he'd brought from his portfolio, stark shots of Tenderloin streets and Janet laughing behind the counter. Lila adjusted a frame, her hands trembling. "My mom's coming, and some kids from school. I figured we could make it real, show them who we are." Miles set his camera on the coffee table, eyeing the chaos. "You sure about this? Your dad's gonna flip." "He's not here," she said. "Business trip. It's just us." The doorbell rang and Tessa walked in, followed by a handful of classmates, art nerds mostly, curious about the buzz. Then Lynn arrived, her eyes widening as she took in the room. "Lila," she breathed, touching a sketch. "This is incredible." "Thanks," Lila said, blushing. She glanced at Miles, who was snapping candids of the crowd. "He helped." The night blurred into laughter and Polaroids, the tension between them easing with every click of his shutter. She caught him watching her once, his lens down, and smiled. Real this time, not staged. Then the front door slammed open. Ethan Tran stood there, rain dripping from his jacket, a smirk plastered on his face. He held up his phone, a photo glowing on the screen. Miles taking an envelope from Ethan's dad outside Brew and Brews. "Nice party," Ethan said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But your boyfriend's a fraud, Lila. Took 10 grand from my old man to ditch you. How's that for real?" The room went silent. Lila's heart sank as she stared at the image. Miles, head down, cash in hand. She turned to him, voice shaking. "Is this true?" "No!" Miles stepped forward, fists clenched. I didn't take it. Your dad tried to buy me off, Lila. He set this up. Likely story, Ethan sneered, tossing the phone onto the couch. Face it, he's been playing you from the start. Miles? She searched his face, desperation clawing at her. Tell me he's lying. I swear, he said, his voice breaking. I'd never. Get out. She cut him off, tears spilling over. Both of you. Now. Ethan shrugged, sauntering out. Miles hesitated, then grabbed his camera and left, the door clicking shut behind him. The crowd murmured, awkward and unsure. Lynn put a hand on Lila's shoulder, but she shook it off, sinking onto the stairs. I thought he was different, she whispered, staring at her sketches. Her truth, now tainted. Lynn knelt beside her. I ran from your dad because I didn't fight for what I wanted. Don't make my mistake, Lila. Find out the truth. She nodded, wiping her eyes. The rain pounded harder outside, washing away the night. Her gallery was a wreck, her trust shattered, but her mom's words stuck, a lifeline in the dark. She had to know, for real this time. Will Lila find the truth? Hit subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. I need to know what you think happens next. The fog hung thick over San Francisco the next morning, cloaking Nob Hill in a damp shroud that matched the ache in Lila's chest. She hadn't slept. Her eyes were puffy, her sketchbook still open on the floor where she'd left it after Ethan's bombshell. That photo of Miles taking the envelope haunted her, a grainy ghost she couldn't shake. She'd trusted him, let him into her world, and now? Now she didn't know what was real. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, texts from Tessa. You okay? A missed call from Miles, even a curt voicemail from her dad. Home by noon, Lila. We're settling this. She ignored them all, pacing the living room where her sketches still hung, crooked and accusing. Lynn had stayed the night, crashing on the couch, and now she sat there sipping tea, watching Lila like she was a puzzle to solve. You gonna talk to him? Lynn asked, her voice soft but firm. Who? Miles? Lila snorted, kicking a stray pencil across the hardwood. What's the point? He took the money. Ethan's got proof. Proof can lie, Lynn said, setting her mug down. I learned that the hard way with your dad. Ask him, Lila, face to face. Before she could argue, the front door swung open, and Daniel Nguyen stormed in, his suit wrinkled from an overnight flight. His eyes darted from the sketches to Lynn, then settled on Lila with a glare that could melt steel. What is this? He barked, gesturing at the walls. Some artsy tantrum. I leave for one day and you turn my house into a damn gallery. It's my house too, Lila shot back, crossing her arms. And it's not a tantrum. It's me. Daniel ignored her, turning to Lynn. You put her up to this, didn't you? Filling her head with hippie nonsense again? She's not 6 anymore, Daniel, Lynn said, standing. She's got a voice. Let her use it. Enough! He slammed his briefcase onto the coffee table, the thud echoing. Lila, upstairs. Pack your stuff. You're meeting Brian Lee tonight. 6 o'clock, Russian Hill. His dad's a tech billionaire, and he's a better match than that Carter trash. Brian Lee? Lila's stomach twisted. She'd heard of him. Some smug senior from a rival school, all Rolex watches and crypto bragging. No way. I'm not dating your latest business deal. You don't have a choice, Daniel said, his voice low and final. I'm done with your games. Carter's out of the picture. Scholarship's gone by Monday if you don't cut him loose. You can't do that, she yelled, stepping closer. You don't get to ruin his life because I won't play along. Watch me, he said, pulling out his phone. One call to the board, and he's back in Tenderloin where he belongs. Lila's hands shook, fury boiling over. You're a monster! I'm your father, he snapped, and I'm keeping you safe. Now get ready. He stalked out, leaving the air heavy with his threat. Lynn touched Lila's arm, but she pulled away, grabbing her jacket. I need air, she muttered, bolting for the door. Russian Hill was all sleek condos and manicured trees, a sterile contrast to Tenderloin's grit. The Lee penthouse gleamed at the top of a glass tower, its floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the city lights like a mirror. Lila stood in the elevator, her black dress itching against her skin, her dad's words still ringing. Be polite. This is your future. Brian Lee greeted her with a handshake that felt like a business transaction. Firm, cold, too long. He was tall, polished, his hair gelled into submission. The living room smelled like leather and money, all sharp angles and metal furniture. A massive TV played some tech conference on mute, and a maid scurried off with their coats. So, Brian said, lounging on a white sofa, your dad says you're into art. That's cute. Lila forced a smile, sitting stiffly across from him. Yeah, I draw, paint sometimes. Cool hobby, he said, sipping a soda. But when we're married, you won't need it. My dad's handing me his VR startup. Billions in play. Wife's gotta stay home, keep things smooth. Kids, you know? Her smile dropped. Married? I'm 17, and I don't want kids or your startup. He laughed, like she'd told a joke. You'll come around. Art's fine for now, but it's not a job. My wife won't work. I'm not your wife, she said, voice rising. And I never will be. Brian's grin faltered, but before he could reply, Daniel walked in with Brian's dad, a wiry man in a turtleneck who clapped him on the back. See? They're hitting it off already. Lila stood, fists clenched. Dad, I'm not doing this. Sit down, Daniel hissed, his eyes darting to the Lees. Don't embarrass me. No, she said louder. You don't own me. I'm not a pawn for your hotel empire or his VR crap. I'm done. She grabbed her bag and stormed out, the elevator ride down a blur of rage and tears. Outside, the fog swallowed her as she ran, her heels clacking against the pavement. She didn't stop until she hit Fisherman's Wharf, the salty air stinging her lungs. Tourists milled around, snapping pics of the sea lions, but she found a bench and collapsed, staring at the dark water. Her phone buzzed. Miles again. Can we talk? Please. She hesitated, then texted back. Brew and Brews, 30 mins. The coffee shop was quiet when she walked in, the jukebox humming a scratchy tune. Janet was behind the counter, wiping it down, and Miles sat in their usual booth, his camera beside him. He looked up, relief flashing across his face, but it faded when he saw her expression. You okay? He asked, standing. No, she said, sliding in across from him. But I need the truth. That photo Ethan had. Did you take the money? Miles shook his head, pulling out his phone. No, look. He swiped to a video, shaky footage from Brew and Brews's security cam. It showed Ethan's dad, a burly guy in a suit, shoving an envelope at Miles outside the shop. Miles pushed it back, saying something inaudible, then walked away. The timestamp matched the photo Ethan had flaunted. He offered me 10 grand to disappear, Miles said, pocketing the phone. Said it'd save my mom's job if I ditched you. I told him to shove it. Lila stared at him, the knot in her chest loosening. Why didn't you tell me? I tried. You kicked me out before I could. He leaned forward, voice low. I'm not in this for cash, Lila. I never was. Then why? She asked, searching his eyes. He hesitated, then said, Because you're the first person who didn't look through me. Even if it's fake, it means something. She swallowed hard, guilt mixing with relief. I'm sorry. I should have listened. It's cool, he said, but his shoulders stayed tense. Janet came over then, setting a plate of fries between them. On the house, she said, winking. You two look like you need it. Thanks, Mom, Miles muttered, grabbing a fry. Lila smiled faintly, the warmth of the shop seeping into her. But the peace didn't last. The bell jingled, and Daniel stormed in, his face a storm cloud. Janet stepped back wary as he loomed over the booth. Lila, car, now, he barked. And you? He jabbed a finger at Miles. You're finished. Janet, you're fired. I own half this block. Good luck finding another gig. What? Lila shot up, knocking the fries to the floor. You can't do that? I can, he said, cold as ice. You want to ruin your life? Fine, but you're not dragging me down with you. Mr. Nguyen, Janet started, voice trembling. Please. Save it, he cut her off, turning to Lila. Choose. Him or us. You walk out that door with this kid, you're cut off. Trust fund, college, everything. Lila's breath hitched. She looked at Miles, his clenched jaw, his mom's wide eyes, then back at her dad. You don't get it, she said, voice steady despite the tears. I'm not your puppet. I'm leaving. She grabbed her bag and bolted, the bell clanging behind her. The fog swallowed her again as she hit the wharf, collapsing on that same bench. Footsteps crunched behind her, and Miles appeared, hands in his pockets. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. Yeah, I did, she replied, staring at the water. But I can't drag you into this anymore. It's too much. He sat beside her, silent, the sea lions barking in the distance. The night stretched on, heavy and unresolved. Is this the end for Lila and Miles? Subscribe and comment to stay in the loop. I want to hear your guesses. The fog lingered over Fisherman's Wharf that night, curling around the pilings like smoke, the bay a black mirror under a moonless sky. Lila sat on the bench, her breath fogging in the damp air, her black dress soaked from the drizzle. Miles stood a few feet away, hands shoved deep in his hoodie pockets, the silence between them thick as the mist. She'd just walked out on her dad, on everything. Nob Hill, the trust fund, the life she'd been groomed for. And now, staring at the water, she felt untethered, a kite with its string cut. You didn't have to follow me, she said, voice hoarse from yelling. Miles shrugged, kicking a pebble into the bay. It plinked, ripples spreading out and vanishing. Didn't feel right leaving you here. Not after that. She glanced at him, his cap pulled low, rain streaking his cheeks. He looked as lost as she felt, but he'd stayed, even after her dad fired his mom, even after she'd pushed him away. Your mom's out of a job because of me, she said, guilt gnawing at her. I screwed everything up. Nah, he said, sitting beside her. She's tough. We'll figure it out. Always do. Lila pulled her knees to her chest, the bench cold against her legs. You should hate me. I dragged you into this mess, accused you of stuff you didn't do. Stop, he cut in, turning to her. His hazel eyes caught the glow of a street lamp, fierce and steady. I chose this, Lila. The second I said yes at Golden Gate Park, I was in. Not for the money, for you. Her breath hitched. Why? He looked away, rubbing the back of his neck. Because you're, I don't know, different. You see shit, real shit, and you don't hide it. That photo I took, the one that won, it wasn't just some random shot. It was you, sketching like the world didn't own you. I wanted to keep that. She stared at him, the words sinking in slow and heavy. The rain pattered on, a soft drumbeat against the wharf's wooden planks. You're an idiot, she muttered, but a smile tugged at her lips, the first real one in days. Yeah, he said, grinning back. You keep saying that. They sat there, the sea lions barking in the distance, until her phone buzzed. A text from Lynn. I'm still at the house. Come back. We'll fix this together. Lila hesitated, then stood. I've got an idea, she said, brushing wet hair from her face. One last shot. You in? Miles nodded, grabbing his camera. Always. The Mission District was alive the next night, its streets pulsing with murals and music, a gritty heartbeat under the city's polished skin. Lila had found an old warehouse near 16th Street, its walls peeling but sturdy, rented cheap with cash she'd scraped from her savings. She'd spent the day with Lynn and Tessa, who'd shown up with an apology and a box of donuts, turning it into a gallery. Her sketches hung alongside Miles's photos, strung up with twine and clothespins, fairy lights casting a warm glow over the chaos. The crowd was small but real. Art kids from school, a few locals lured by flyers Tessa had plastered around. Lynn moved through them, her floral skirt swishing, offering cups of cheap punch. Miles snapped candids, his lens catching laughter and quiet moments alike. Lila stood by her cherry blossom sketch, the one she'd drawn after her mom left, its branches stark against a paper sky. This is dope, Tessa said, sidling up with a donut in hand. Sorry I was a jerk about Miles. He's okay, I guess, Lila smirked. High praise from you. Yeah, well, don't get used to it. Tessa nudged her, then wandered off to flirt with a guy by the punch bowl. The door creaked open, and Lila's heart sank. Daniel Nguyen stepped in, his suit stark against the warehouse's grunge. The chatter faded, eyes darting between them. He scanned the room, her art, Miles's prints, the defiance written in every line, then walked straight to her. What is this? He asked, voice low but sharp. My life, she said, chin up. Not yours, mine. He stared at the cherry blossom sketch, his jaw tightening. You think this pays bills? You're throwing away everything I built for you. No, she said, stepping closer. You built it for you. I'm not your puppet, Dad. I'm not marrying Brian Lee or Ethan or anyone you pick. This, she gestured at the walls. This is what I want. You'll regret it, he warned, but his voice cracked just a little. Maybe, she said, but it'll be my regret, not yours. He turned to the sketch again, and for a second, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or memory. Then Lynn appeared, her hand light on his arm. Daniel, she said softly, look at her. Really look. He did. The room held its breath as he studied the sketch, then Lila. Her damp hair, her stubborn glare, the daughter he'd tried to mold. I wanted you safe, he muttered, almost to himself. Like I couldn't keep her. Lila frowned. Who? Your mom, he said, voice breaking. I pushed her away. Thought money would fix it. It didn't. She froze, the confession hitting like a wave. Before she could respond, the door banged open again. Ethan Tran sauntered in, hands in his pockets, a sheepish look replacing his usual smirk. Hey, he said, scratching his neck. Can we talk? Lila crossed her arms. You've got 10 seconds. He sighed, glancing at the crowd. I was a dick, okay? My dad's been on my ass about the family deal, same as yours. I didn't mean half the crap I pulled. That photo, I twisted it. Carter's clean. She blinked, caught off guard. Why tell me now? Because you're right, he said, shrugging. Money's not everything. I'm out. Dad can shove his merger. Good luck with this. He waved at the gallery, then walked out, leaving a stunned silence behind. Miles stepped up, camera in hand. "That just happened?" "Yeah," Lila said, dazed. She turned to her dad, who still stood by the sketch, his shoulders slumped. "Dad?" He didn't answer, just nodded once, sharp and final, then left, the door clicking shut. Lynn squeezed her hand. "He'll come around. Give him time." "Maybe," Lila said, but she wasn't sure she cared anymore. The weight was lifting piece by piece. The night wore on, the crowd thinning until it was just her, Miles, Lynn, and Tessa cleaning up. Lila stepped outside, the air crisp with salt from the bay. Miles followed, his camera slung over his shoulder. "So," he said, leaning against the warehouse wall, "we done pretending?" She smiled, small but real. "Think we stopped pretending a while ago." He grinned, pulling something from his pocket, a cherry blossom pendant, hand-carved from wood, strung on a leather cord. "Made this a while back. Figured it's yours now." She took it, fingers brushing his, warmth spreading through her. "Thanks, Miles." They walked to the wharf again, the city sprawling behind them. The fog had lifted, stars pricking through the dark. She slipped the pendant on, its weight grounding her. "Let's paint our own future," she said, looking out at the water. He nodded, their hands brushing, not staged, not fake, just them. The sea lions barked, the waves lapped, and the skyline glittered like a promise. They didn't know what came next. Money was tight, her dad was gone, his mom was jobless. But for the first time, it didn't matter. They'd figure it out. Together. What's next for Lila and Miles? Subscribe and leave a comment to let me know what you loved most. I'm dying to hear your thoughts on their journey.